not much more than 10 years ago since I was sitting where you guys are sitting in a circle, and Bob, possibly, or well, somebody else from TAF was talking about something exactly like the kind of thing we're talking about this morning. And you know, like a lot of people, I had spent decades reading stuff and doing philosophy and doing self-help, and always at something. It was at something, I didn't know what it was at. And one of the things that I learned in TAF was, you know, unless you know what you're at, all the work you're doing, it's unfocused. You need to get a clear understanding of what you're at in order for what you're doing to be effective. I had never heard anybody say that before. You know, what have you been at? This was the question to myself, spending decades reading self-help books and a bit of Christianity, whatever. I mean, and most people here are saying the same thing. I'm always at something, I'm doing something. I can't quite name it, I don't know what. I mean, life isn't too bad. But I know I've come across something that's a bit different. So one of the things was, and I remember it like being appalled if somebody go around and said, well, why are you here? What is your problem? What are you at with all of this? I thought, well, it's bloody rude to ask somebody. I paid my money. But then it kind of spelled out to me like, no, it's for yourself. What you're doing will only be effective if you know what you're at. So it's about clearing up your mind about what are you trying to do. So for me, at some time after that, after the shock of realising that I had gone all the way to the States for something and I couldn't actually articulate what I was after, but I was after that thing the same as everybody else. And somebody said, that's not enough. You need to be able to name it. You need to have some way of talking to yourself, of thinking to yourself, of connecting with yourself about this. And after that I heard somebody talking about, they said, it's the human problem. What is the human problem? That's what we're all suffering from, is the human condition. And the question is, how do I recognize that in myself? How do I know that personally for myself? And I heard one of these guys talking about it, and I heard him saying, you know, it's a case of misidentification. Our problem is we're misidentified. And I thought, misidentified? It was like a diagnosis. The human condition. This was a way of diagnosing the human condition. I was thinking, so how am I misidentified? So what is identification? So what we're talking about here is, I was able to take something that somebody had said and make it personal to me. How did this apply to me? How was I misidentified and how was this happening? So my work after that was, so what's identification? How are you identified? It's when you're completely and entirely lost in something, like I'm angry. You know, you might say, I am angry. At the moment that you're angry and giving out, you're completely and entirely in that. You've forgotten everything else. You're identified with the anger. I am angry, right? You might be, I am a Republican. Right now, it brings up all the layer of stuff I have about being a particular kind of politician. I am a mother. Oh, there's all the whole stream about my mothering stuff. And in that, right there, you're locked into a particular kind of thing. And I copped on that this is how misidentification happens. And one of the big steps for me is, there is one true identification. There's just one of them, just it. And there's 100,000 misidentifications. And we're hopping around from one to the other. I'm a mother, I'm a politician, I'm a teacher, I'm a whatever, I'm such and such age. So the misidentification is when we're hopping all over the place. You know, and it's changing all the time. And there's conflicts between me being a mother and me being a whatever. This is what, so inner conflict is when there's a distance or a contradiction between two things we're claiming to be. You know, sometimes at home I just use things like about the guy that says, I absolutely love my family, you know, the family man, and yet he goes to the pub every night and spends all his money. They're in complete contradiction, but he doesn't see it himself. Because the thing with a misidentification, when you're in it completely. And you don't notice the contradictions. So sometimes we can look at other people and we can see their contradictions, but we can't see our own. But we feel it. We feel the competing desires or the letdowns or whatever they are. And we didn't even realise we had an expectation and it wasn't met. These are the kinds of things. So for me, hearing that word, it's a case of misidentification. And I'm misidentified when I'm going from one of these things to the other, hopping around. And when I'm in each one, I'm completely in it. So my job for myself was, now I'd also learned from Richard Rose, that it's as these misidentifications drop away, and they very often just drop as soon as you see them. Sometimes you have to do something about it. You might have to do a good bit about it, but sometimes by simply seeing it, you just stop doing that thing. It might be the thing of behaving in a way to get people to like you, and you realise actually your ploys to make people like you turn them off you. You know, it's painful to see, but it literally drops. You can stop doing that. I mean, you don't even have to say I'll stop doing it. You've seen what you were at with yourself. So in order to catch the misidentifications, you have to become a good observer. You have to be willing to look at yourself, and you have to be willing to take on what you see. You know, instead of being so invested in everybody liking me or being whatever, you have to be, kind of a courage comes on you, and you kind of say, look, this is the thing that's causing me such suffering. I need to see it. Yeah. I need to be willing to deal with it. It'll keep running the show if I don't do it. So, and then, as I said, the Richard Rose thing is, as you catch your misidentifications or see them, they either drop away or you do something with them. What's happening is you're moving backwards from what's false towards what's true. And he refers to it as reversing from untruth. Reversing from what causes you suffering, from your conflicts and so on. But you have to be able to see them. And as they drop away, eventually what happens is you find that all that's left is what's true, what's permanent. So another word for truth is what's permanent and what's temporary. All our misidentifications are temporary. They're only around for a while. You're only a teacher for a while, you're only 20 for a while, you're only a Democrat for a while, or whatever. Whatever is the particular thing. But there is something that is permanent. And by permanent, I mean before you come into a body or after you leave it. Really permanent. That's there. And by losing these things or reversing from them or dropping them, we are reversing into truth. Now almost everything else you do in your life, what happens is you have a goal and you go towards it. We set it and we know, because it's out there, we know, am I achieving it, am I getting there or whatever. The problem with the spiritual path is it's not a goal out there, it's behind us, and it's a reversal thing. So you never know where you are on the path. You may know, all right, things are getting easier, or things are getting, I'm less conflicted, I have a better sense of something. But, you know, and you fall backwards. Well, I don't want to say you fall backwards, because it isn't like that. It's a revelation happens. At least that's how it happened to me. So I'm saying this to you because my hope would be in giving you the example of how it worked for me, and be good, like if you did your one as well, that you will begin to name for yourself, how am I, you know, what is my definition of the spiritual path? What am I trying to achieve for myself here, and how? What diagnosis of the human condition can I apply to me? Do you understand how I'm trying to get you focused and honed in? And for each one of you, it'll be individual. You know, it'll be, the misidentification one worked for me. Don't ask me why that I got that and heard it. But I've heard other people say it in other ways, and they're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, you could talk, for me it was about transcendence rather than changing. In other words, instead of trying to do something, I just had to transcend it. So I wasn't trying to go back down and kill the ego. You hear people talking about that. Instead of trying to get in there and play around and mess with these things, it was just separate from them. just so that you can see it. And a very important point, and Tess put it in these words the other day, was you have to become teachable. You know, if you can't hear the things you need to hear because you're refuting them, it's a big thing nowadays to be offended. You know, that seems to be one of the big fads now is, you know, how often can you get outraged? You know? And that's exactly the opposite way you want to be going. You don't want to be, you know, becoming emotionally involved with everything that's not going your way and trying to force the world into doing what it needs to do so that you can have your way. You want to become to where that stuff doesn't bother you so that you can become teachable, so that you can transcend these things. You can't get away from them if they're always affecting you emotionally. You know, it dawned on me one day that I couldn't stand going into the city, into Denver, because I told myself, I hate when these other drivers get road rage and start bothering me. And I don't want to go down in there and have to deal with that traffic, with the road rage. And then it occurred to me that it's not them, it's me. I get upset by what they're doing, and that's what really bothers me, is me being upset. You know, I can't make them stop being crazy, so how do I not get affected myself? And it was like, it's my problem. It's how am I being affected by my own emotions, not by everybody else, but what is that in there? So how can we stay steady and see what's going on and then back up? That retreat from error. It's almost a palpable thing. You start realizing that you don't know what's back there. But the more you retreat from what's in front of you, the more you start backing up. And then the more you back up, the less is back there bothering you, that you can't see it. It's a big thing about what the Jungians call shadow work. You know, whatever you can't see in the unconscious is what's going to trip you up. So the farther you back up, the less these things can get a hold on you. You get them out in the front, out in the light, where you can see them, you don't have as much of a problem.
You know, it's like when when you're 20, it seems to me about the age when you're at the height of your ego. You know, it's completely brittle. So you see the world through a very narrow thing, and everything that happens is in relation to you. It either pleases you or displeases, good or it's bad, whatever. It's a very narrow lens. And with self-inquiry, what happens is you begin to get a bigger picture. In fact, as you're moving back, this actually happens to people quite naturally as they mature. You know, but just think about the difference between when you were 20 and 30. By the time you're 30, you can see, you know, you're not so dependent maybe on the people around you. You can give them a bit of space. You've developed a bit more tolerance. Literally, just maturing as a proper adult. What's happened is your lens of viewing the world has gotten a bit bigger. And then we might say have reached a stage when we're about 40, you know, when you're as mature as you're going to get, you know, you have a bit of tolerance for other people, you don't have to be the centre of everything. You've learned from some of the knocks in life. And then with self-inquiry, or with what we're talking about here, so you function well in the world, we'll say, when your lens is this side, and you know, people find you charismatic and you're not completely selfish and egotistical, you can fit in and so on. And we're deliberately saying, now deliberately can you start, you see, and as you go back, you know, and you just even see that, you get a bigger picture of everything. You know, as you reverse from it, you start seeing things, and you start seeing patterns. You know, patterns of behaviour and so on, including your own patterns, but you also see other patterns. Now, some of it is simply from getting old, you know. I mean, I'm nearly 70 now, and, you know, I have grandchildren. And so I can see the pattern of when my own children were in it, we were completely in there together. And now they're a generation further down, and they're at that stage now. Next thing they'll be teenagers, and then all the trouble will start. You know, you can see the pattern. And you can see patterns in other people. And as you begin to see patterns, as opposed to individual, unique things, you also begin to see how to be more functional. And your priorities, like what really matters and what only matters a bit. what matters long term really, and what's passing.
Yeah.
So becoming,
A drop in the self-concern, that's a lot of what's going on is that emotional maturity thing. Just being able to not be completely wrapped up in yourself and be able to get a little bit of observation going on.
That's a quick question. So you started to see the emotions and the anxieties and the thought patterns, and in my experience, I found that I got quicker at seeing.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Does that resonate?
Absolutely. It's like any skill. The first time somebody shows you how to do something, you're awkward and all the rest, and you do it a few times, and you become skillful, and you can do things very quickly.
Mm. And then I would say that there was a period where I could catch myself,
Yeah.
and but I never reached a stage, or I haven't reached a stage where things have actually have improved. I've never reached a stage where I felt that these emotions and anxieties have gone completely.
No.
There's always triggers.
Yeah.
Sure.
Are we trying to eliminate altogether, or are we just trying to catch and see them?
It gets to the point where you're trying not to react to your reactions.
Okay, so you'll feel something in your body.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
So you can accept it.
Yeah.
You know, there's the big difference between, say, judgment and discernment. You know, Rose talked a lot about discernment. His definition was you're able to tell the difference between garbage and what smells worse than garbage. So you can start picking your way through. That's the retreat from error. You know, you back away from what's more unreal. You can't see the truth. If you could see it, then you wouldn't have why are we here? So you see what's less true, and you have that acceptance of being able to see your reactions and not react. So you stop the chain.
Right.
You don't have to react to your reactions. There's nothing wrong with if somebody comes up and punches you, you know, you're going to have a reaction. But are you going to have a reaction and be offended?
Yeah.
There's a big difference there. Is how it comes back like that.
And feel bad with yourself because you punched them back.
Yeah.
You know,
And then having
oh, they
guilty
punched me and
and-
I'm such a terrible person. I should, you know, that's the second layer. That's what goes actually. Do you know what I mean? Emotions remain. In fact, feelings are much more clear and much more, I won't say intense, but they're much more clear. I mean, the awakened person is not unfeeling. They probably just don't have all the layers of guilt and so on that go with it.
Yeah, the cloud of anxiety or whatever.
Would you say that the purpose of this kind of inquiry is